Is a biohybrid system a single population, or is it an interaction among populations? Exploring this population level perspective can change the way we think about understanding and designing biohybrid systems. My name is Eric Aaron. I'm in the Department of Computer Science at Colby College.
And my name is John Long, and I'm in the Biology and Cognitive Science departments at Vassar College. And this population level perspective really begins from biology. And in biology, we think of a population of animals being composed of individuals of the same species interacting with each other at the same time and place. Part of what we're going to do today is broaden that definition in a principled way to include biohybrid systems. So more generally, a population is also a large and varied collection of animals interacting with each other and with their environment. Our process really starts with modeling a biohybrid system. As part of building a physical biohybrid system, we advocate first modeling one. And that's for the simple reason that a model, once formulated, guides the harder problem of physical implementation. So our model has a number of components. There's a biomimetic and cognimimetic models that go together. The biomimetic model focuses on the focuses on the physical mechanisms that play here. The body, muscles, and neural systems. The cognitive system focuses on the cognitive mechanisms at work, sensory processing, planning, and action selection. And from this model of the fish, in this case, the sharks, we build a biorobotic model, which is meant to be a very specific type of robot that is focused, as Barbara Webb has shown us, on representing a hypothesis about the organism or the biological system. So the biorobotic model is about something very specific, a hypothesis, a proposed operational mechanism at work. In the case of predator-prey interactions, for example, we could hypothesize something about the sensory systems of both of the species involved in that interaction. The biorobotic approach helps focus the design of the models and is important for testing one's ideas about how a system works. So when we think about modeling the biohybrid system as a whole, it's really integrated parts of different kinds of models. So we have a model composed of models of the fish and models of robots modeling the fish. That's our integrated system here. The challenge for us, the goal, the larger goal, is to emulate in our biohybrid system the rich dynamics of populations of individuals interacting with each other and their local environment to behave, learn, and evolve. And notice the plural here, populations of individuals. What we're going to do for starters, though, is focus on a single population, as biologists tend to do. And the fundamental property of a population for evolutionary biology is that they are units of evolution. So in population genetics, the word population does not refer to an entire species, but rather a group of individuals of the same species living within a sufficiently restricted place so that any member can potentially mate with the other. And the focus is on locally interbreeding units. Interestingly, this focus on interbreeding individuals excludes asexual members of the world. Since many robots are asexually reproduced, we ought to figure out how to deal with this problem, which we will get to here. So take-home populations are fundamental units of evolution, asexual organisms excluded, but we want to include them in our population. So we bring this idea of a population as an evolutionary unit together, which is an organizing framework for what a population is, with the need for having asexual organisms in there, and we'll talk about that as we go forward, wanting to emulate the rich dynamics of populations. And we want to pull out two key features: variation of individuals within a population and their interactions, both within a population of the same species and, as the green arrows indicate here, if we think about different populations interacting, that the interactions include what's going on between different populations that happen to be together at the same time. So we're going to focus here on variation in a population and how important that is for having rich population dynamics. This paper, which we just published in Frontiers in Robotics and AI, on embodied computational evolution. In this paper, we digitally simulated these crazy looking sphere bots. These are connected segments that are motorized to have the different parts work against each other. These are sensory motor creatures with touch sensors that respond to touching on the ground. You can see they come in a variety of ways and they locomote by wiggling around. Part of the challenge for us in thinking carefully about where does variation come from was not just a genetic basis of traits, but also a bio-inspired genetic basis of traits. So we have in the table here, we have a bio-inspired genetic code, just like we have in life forms. We have a genome about the size of an RNA virus here. So we're trying to match some of the features, model in a biorobotic way, trying to match some of the features of life here and putting this together. In addition, we wanted to include an explicit developmental system, which is important in multicellular animals. And so when we think about development, what we're talking about are variable individuals from genomes and development. So of course, one of the beauties of having a genetic system is you can have mutations, as you can see in the red arrow there, genetic mutations at the level of the genome as one of the drivers of variation. You can also have variation at the level of the transcriptome. So in this project, we introduced transcription errors, which occur as the genome is expressing itself. I don't have time to go all the details of the development that starts on the right. Suffice it to say that those transcripts make parts and regulatory elements that interact over time in an explicit method to generate variable morphologies. And so we have two types of error here, genetic mutation and transcription errors. And what we're going to see coming up here is that those generate morphological variants. This is a busy slide. Let me quickly explain what's happening. A is the rate of mutation and its effects that are partitioned by color over generational time. B is the rate of the transcription error. It's the same magnitude as the mutational error, also color-coded by that rate over generational time. And C, we have those two effects together. The take-home message here is that when you put both engines of variation together, mutation and transcription error, you get this beautiful process that is not additive. If you look at the purple line in C, you get an interaction that occurs where morphological variants at low rates of mutation and low rates of transcription, but we put everything together in C, we put both of those effects together, and we're able to rescue some of the problems with low levels of variation with these two interacting effects. Now, how does this actually work? We can study on a genetic level these two types of effects, and the take-home message is shown here. So mutation plus transcription error equals enhanced genetic variation. Up on the top there, we've got the cost of these processes, which is as the error rate on the x-axis increases, the fitness on the y-axis up top decreases. But here's the beautiful thing we get. Mutation, we know we expect genetic variation, which on the bottom graph is shown on the y-axis. We do not expect something like an epigenetic transcription error to help the population maintain genetic variation, but it does. So in this paper, we've got these two independent drivers of genetic and morphological variation. Now, what's missing, of course, when we think back to modeling the biohybrid population, we've just shown you data on how to create variation in a population. By the way, an asexual group of populations there that we were studying. What is missing is anything about the interactions of those individuals. And so that's what we want to talk to you about next. It's the harder problem, we would claim. And so we haven't gotten there yet. And so we'll take you through some of our plans for that. And essentially starting with the question of how do we understand the interactions of fish and robots? Some beautiful work from people in this workshop and elsewhere. Some folks perform experiments directly on fish and robots. We've already explained to you why we want to model first and why we advocate for that. So we model the interactions of fish and robots as cognitive agents.
And the recognition that fish are cognitive agents. If you are a fish who happens to be watching this video right now, then you already know you're a cognitive agent. But we recognize, as not everyone does, that fish can be understood to be goal-directed cognitive agents, complete cognitive agents in the sense of that term. We want to model the robots in that framework as well. When we're looking for a modeling framework that allows us to represent things this way, we're looking to represent both fish and robots as flexible, goal-directed agents capable of the high level of cognition of goal-directedness. The agents have physical and cognitive elements that underlie behavior. Their bodies and their cognitive systems integrate, mesh together to underlie behavior. The individuals must be able to learn in the context of their environments and must be integrated, not only the physical and cognitive integration, but the entire system integrated within an environment. That's a big ask for a modeling framework, but we'll talk about one that takes some steps getting there. First, on to modeling fish as cognitive agents.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, fish as goal-directed agents, one of the best studied types of interaction among fish and actually different kinds of animals is predator-prey interactions. And what you're going to see here in this video is a school of triggerfish, and in comes a shark here. And the goals are clear, right? We have groups of individuals trying not to be eaten, and we have one individual here trying to be eaten. So this is one of the values in a very complex world of biology of focusing on a single type of interaction. We have previously modeled predator-prey interactions with physical robots. Here are two of them. And so we know that this can be done in meaningful ways, and we evolved the prey robot in our previous work here. And so we now want to bring it into the realm of our modeling. So goal-directed behavior of embodied agents moving through their environments, we claim, is necessarily the result of the agent's integration across cognitive and physical components. For models to better support both production and analysis of goal-directed behavior, the relevant cognitive and physical components should be integrated in the model. And the robots to the left here do not have the relevant cognitive parts. I should mention that. They have relevant physical parts, but they're lacking on the cognitive. So thinking about intelligent behavior modeling and what we call the hybrid cognitive agents, or HCAs, we can ask, how is behavior dynamically enacted?
And along with that, how is behavior co-created with other agents and environments, broadening from the individual to a more integrated full system?
Also, how is behavior a function of the physics of the agent and the environment?
And it's important to note in that by physics, we don't just mean the biomechanical dynamics, but also the cognitive dynamics of what's going on there. Leading to the next question, when we have these interacting complete cognitive agents, how do we model the behavior of two of these agents interacting?
And to give a sense of that, let me read from Professor Aaron's paper here. For a modeling framework to enable the design and analysis of such integrated intelligence, the underlying representations in the design of the robot should be dynamically sensitive, capable of reflecting both continuous motion and micro-cognitive influences, while also directly representing the necessary beliefs and intentions for goal-directed behavior. And I'll let you take it from here, Eric.
Why, thank you, John. So when I think about modeling this kind of complex behavior, one of the test beds that I use, one of the platforms I use to think about this, is the child's game of tag. Hopefully you're familiar with it to some extent. If you happen to be a cognitive fish, you might have recognized it from that video John showed a couple of slides before, which looked to me like a heck of a tag game. In a tag game, there's one player called it for purposes of the game, and a bunch of other players that are not it players, as represented here in the little diagram. The object of the game is to not be tagged, to be not it for as much of the game as possible. The it player tries to tag the not it players, just like that shark was trying to, let's generously and gently say, tag the fish on that video a couple of slides before. This is a really interesting framework for studying this kind of behavior. And the In the version we talked about in my 2016 paper, we have bases as part of the game of tag where the not it players can go to be safe from being tagged if they're touching a base. There are obstacles along the way so that there's some obstacle avoidant navigation as part of this. There can be many not it players, a population of them perhaps, and one it player. So there's a lot there, and there's actually many variations of this game of tag. If you don't know the rules, it's actually kind of interesting to look up how many variations there are. But hopefully many of you are familiar with it. And this is a very interesting kind and solid kind of framework for our investigations. There are multiple behaviors. The it player has multiple behaviors. The not it players have multiple behaviors. There's a kind of predator-prey dynamics that goes on in here. There can be a multi-agent cooperation among not it players. There's goal directedness, different but intersecting goals for interacting goals, for the it and not it players. And this brings us to the kind of behavior that we want in our biohybrid system. The behavior of these agents is emergent. It's a time evolving result of the microcognitive changes in embodied physical actuation interacting in a physical world. It requires a kind of cognitive model, ideally a cognimemetic model, and predator-prey dynamics, all of which take us into the kinds of things we were looking for in our models that led to biohybrid systems. When I think about the cognimemetic model, so the word is derived the same way biomimetic is, that it has some kind of representational similarity to what goes on in actual cognition. When I think about a cognimemetic model that might be used for this kind of behavior, I think of the classical framework of belief, desire, intention model, and BDI. The BDI model came about from cognitive science studies, philosophy studies in the 1980s, based on the realization that all three of these kinds of cognitive elements, beliefs, desires, and intentions, described up here on the slide, are all necessary for goal-directed behavior in cognitive systems. It could have been thought that you didn't need both desires and intentions. Maybe just beliefs, facts about the world, and desired goal states would have been sufficient, but desires and intentions are distinguishable from each other. As a kind of classic example from the literature, it's possible for a person to both desire to lose weight and desire to have a milkshake for lunch every day. But those are conflicting desires, and a person can't really intend to do both of those things. Intention is a committed goal state, and intention has more control over action selection and more control over constraining the reasoning. So there are these distinguishing properties of intentions that come up from some classic BDI work. And this BDI work, I should say, has been implemented in practical agents repeatedly. There's a long history in the literature of that. With these distinguishing properties of intention, where intentions resist reconsideration, they resist conflict with other intentions. They control conduct, things that desires don't do. And these intentions and the beliefs and desires along with it have historically been framed as proposition value. They're either true or false within an agent. An agent either has a belief or doesn't, has an intention connected to conduct, to behavior, or doesn't. So we have this great cognimemetic foundation for goal-directed behavior needed for cognitive fish and for the robots. We're trying to come up with a framework that will let us model both. But unfortunately, it doesn't, in the classical presentation, allow for the real-time dynamics that we might want in some applications, including biohybrid systems. For my work, I recast the traditional BDI framework as dynamical intention. So instead of representing intentions and beliefs and desires as true false values, and thus not especially sensitive to real-time micro-variations in cognition, we represent each of these cognitive elements, beliefs, desires, and intentions, by continuously varying activation values, making a spreading activation concept into it. Each of these can be thought of as kind of salience in mind. So the activation on a belief be thought of how strongly the belief is in mind at that time, how salient it is, how strong it is at that moment in the agent's behavior. The activation of desire could be the intensity of how much that desire is felt. The activation on an intention, higher activation, would be a higher priority to the associated task. Every intention, because it's associated with behavior, in the presentation, our 2016 paper, is associated with behavior and characterizes the priority, the importance of that task. What this enables is for us to use differential equations to govern the values of these time-varying cognitive quantities over time. And we can design them so that the differential equations enable intentions to adhere to the distinguishing properties of BDI. So they're really BDI intentions. This change to differential equation representations is important. It allows us to have a model that I call hybrid dynamical cognitive agents based on the control theoretic mathematical notion of hybrid dynamical systems, which integrate and distinguish both discrete and continuous dynamics. So in the state transition diagram here for the tag playing agents in 2016 paper, you can see there's a not it agent that has multiple behaviors. It can run from base to base trying to stay safe, and then it can protect another player. There's a whole lot of behaviors. And so there are discrete transitions among behaviors. Each behavior, which we'd call mode, consists of a system of differential equations that govern the time-varying changes, the real-time changes in both the physical and cognitive states of the agents. So the beliefs, desires, and intentions all change in real time as governed by differential equations, just the same way position, speed, turning radius does. Because everything, both the cognitive and physical systems, are represented in the unifying language of differential equations. Every variable in the physical system, speed, heading angle, turning angular velocity, whatever it is, can be a parameter in the differential equation of every cognitive system and vice versa. That lets us get to a perspective on this that can be shown in the spreading activation framework in the bottom right of this slide, where every element can have an excitatory or inhibitory effect on every other element. And this is integrated across the physical and cognitive systems because they're integrated in the same underlying language of differential equations. That way, any element can be part of the learning process of any other element. This results in very subtle behavior where things like agents can move or turn faster based on having higher or lower cognitive load. If they're near a target and don't have to think so much, don't have to move so much, they can think faster. And it can result, as shown in our paper, in learning of physical and cognitive attributes together, where to learn user-specified strategies, say without human intervention, it can be put together so that instead of training the cognitive system with once and the physical system separately, it's one integrated cognitive system, and the learning process can take advantage of it so that an agent learns not just to change its mind or to change its body, but to change both together. So this enables the integrated cognitive physical agents in a real-time environment responding to unknowns. And that's what we want when we model fish as cognitive agents. And that's what we want when we model robots as cognitive agents. And in particular, that's what we want when we model their interactions. It may sound like we've gone far afield from talking about populations, but to get a definition of population that focuses on behavior and thus will enable including asexual individuals in populations, we focus, or Sterner here from 2017 paper, focuses not only on the interbreeding of populations, but the interactions of populations and what causal relationships are possible between individuals and between their environments.
So when we get to,
go ahead, John, please.
Yeah, back to thinking about biohybrid systems, as Eric has set us up for beautifully, thank you. We can also pay off this idea of what happens with asexual populations. So here with Sterner is a definition that allows asexual populations to exist, right, without the individuals having to interbreed because of that focus on the causal relationships between individuals. And note here also in Stirner's work between individuals and their environments. And their environments is where we get to insert other populations, right? So we can have our beautiful interactions and our variation, our populations here as well. And this is what gives us these rich dynamics of populations in the world. So evolution here, thinking about populations that way, has helped us put into context what we're doing with a biohybrid system, which is to give a population level description. And we started off by asking, what's a biohybrid system? Is it one integrated population or multiple interacting populations? And why does that distinction matter? And we have showed you some of how it can help us in understanding biohybrid system design. So we'd like to thank our organizers here and A-Life 2021.
Thank you all.